Why Palestine? Why now? A lot of people have been asking why Israel has decided to attack the nation of Palestine. Yes, nation, I do consider it to be a nation. But why now? Why now all of a sudden this need to attack Palestine out of seemingly nowhere? Well, it's been widely reported that Israel decided to delay its attack until after the U.S. election because, you know, these attacks on people who are virtually defenseless tend to make America look bad because America's funding them. And the American taxpayer pays out about $3 billion a year to pay for them as well. Now, it was held off for a little a little bit over a week after the U.S. election. It was decided to go ahead and attack Palestine with this targeted assassination against a Hamas leader. But I mean, aside from the election, why? Why do it now? That's what some people have been asking. Well, Rabbi Arthur Waskov agrees that Israel did start the fighting. Now, Professor Michael Chasudovsky notes that he may know the actual reason why. On November 14th, Hamas military commander Ahmad Jabari was murdered in an Israeli missile attack. In a bitter irony, barely a few hours before the attack, Hamas received a draft proposal of a permanent truce agreement with Israel. Hours before Hamas strongman Ahmad Jabari was assassinated, he received the draft of a permanent truce agreement with Israel, which included mechanisms for maintaining the ceasefire in case of a flare-up between Israel and the factions in the Gaza Strip. Targeted assassination of Ahmad Jabari was followed by an extensive bombing campaign under Operation Pillar of Cloud. The latter consists of carefully planned military endeavor. F-16 fighter planes, Apache helicopters, and unmanned drones were deployed. Israeli naval forces deployed along the Gaza shoreline were involved in extensive shelling of civilian targets. Israel's defense minister Ehud Barak has confirmed a scenario of military escalation, blaming Palestine for having committed acts of aggression. They were on the verge of having a permanent peace agreement, a permanent ceasefire between the two states. So why go ahead and actually have an attack? Simple. Israel doesn't want a ceasefire. The nation of Israel doesn't want there to be peace. Israel, as an illegitimate conqueror state, cannot allow the actual state that was there first to exist in order to claim its own legitimacy. It's absolutely... I mean, it's been said for so long that Israel is only here to actually take control of the land and have no interest in peace. They have no interest in peaceful coexistence. I mean, this is certainly a huge indication of that. They were about to reach a permanent ceasefire agreement, and they deliberately destroyed it, because that's not what they really want. Now, that attack by Israel was followed up with dozens of rockets being fired into the country, and then, of course, Hamas fires back. So if you just didn't want the peace agreement, the ceasefire agreement, then just kill the one guy. But they had to go further than that. Not just kill the guy who was going to sign the agreement, but actually provoke another war. They didn't just want it to stop, but they wanted to escalate the situation at the exact same time. This is clearly what has been going on. Now, Palestine's response was known to Israeli planners, because they know exactly what they're going to do, because they do the same thing every time. They're going to start firing rockets back into Israel. And as a result, 3 Israeli citizen casualties are now being listed as having been killed, whereas many Palestinians have been killed in a ratio compared to the 3 Israeli citizens. But, of course, we're supposed to believe that Palestine is the actual aggressor in this situation. What this is a very clearly planned operation with a very clear act by Israel as an act of provocation to try to provoke it. The deaths by these Israeli citizens that were completely predictable, because if you do fire on a country, you can't whine when they fire back at you, is part of getting people angry in Israel to whip up support to go and attack Palestine. But that was the whole point of it to begin with. Now, meanwhile, Israeli attacks on Palestine are being portrayed in the Western media as completely justifiable, like they're right. This is what should happen. This was what meant to happen, and they have it coming to them. Although you will have noticed maybe in the last day or so that they're actually starting to show the impact of the Israeli attacks on Palestinians, which shows a very slight, although a very slight change in Western coverage, they're now starting to show some of the victim impact that Palestine is suffering as a result of the unprovoked Israeli attack, which is, while it is a small change, it is a huge shift in the mentality of Western media that predominantly almost always portrays Palestine as the evil aggressor, even though they're ones with, well, virtually no power. Now, another reason this may be happening is that Israel is expected to hold its own elections in January. Many commentators are saying that the attack on Gaza may have something to do with the Prime Minister trying to win re-election. After all, it is a good tactic. Don't often, when you're in the middle of a war, presidents tend to have more power, and that, well, if you vote me out of power now, then we're going to be in a horrible situation, and the next guy coming in is not going to be able to handle it, and I'm the man for the job, stuff like that. This may be an act by the Israeli Prime Minister to try to preserve his own position. Now, this same top British rabbi that I spoke to earlier was asked by the BBC what this has to do with Iran, that there might be an Iranian connection. And the rabbi did say that this escalation does come just days after reports about a newly re-elected Obama seriously considering a grand bargain that will end the dispute with Iran over nuclear technology, or as they fraudulently claim, nuclear weapons. Because it's clear by now that Iran is not going to back down. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and the people of Iran are not being cowed by these cowardly sanctions by the West, by the United States. They're not being affected by them. I mean, they are being affected, but they're not bowing to the will. The Iranian people are not breaking as a result of these sanctions. These murderous sanctions that are completely unjust. The people are not bending to the will of the U.S., and that is exactly the right thing that should be happening. This is what we are witnessing. They are noticing their tactics aren't working anymore. Sanctions for God knows how long have not worked against North Korea. An embargo for decades has not worked against Cuba, and the same thing is not going to work against the Iranian people. Iranians are too tough for this. Is Iran an ideal place to live? No, but they have every right to self-determination, and this is nothing more than an act of imperialism trying to get them to bend to the will of the U.S. for essentially their interests and the interests of Israel. And Barack Obama knows this. He knows that they're probably not going to win this situation because they can't portray Iran as wanting to have nuclear weapons because they have no evidence of it. The same thing that happened with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. There was no evidence of nuclear weapons, or weapons of mass destruction, which the catchphrase at the time. They don't exist, and they can't show any evidence because they don't exist. Unless opinion on the West is turning around on them. They're starting to people around the world are starting to realize what complete BS this is. Even people in the U.S. right now are starting to realize what a lie this is against Iran. Now, with this agreement possibly coming up, a peaceful agreement between the U.S. and Iran over these supposed nuclear weapons, well, that doesn't go too good for Israel. Israel wants Iran wiped out. They want every regime that doesn't suck up to them to be destroyed, whether through their own firepower or preferably through U.S. power, through the U.S. taxpayers' expense, and so that America can take the heat for it. Well, a peace agreement is just completely unacceptable to the state of Israel. They have to continue these acts of aggression in order to incite more violence to justify more Israeli imperialism, and imperialism by the U.S. Well, doing this renewed attack on Palestine, of course, is going to escalate tensions between Iran and the U.S., knowing that the U.S. is fully supporting what's going on, and not only that, and to a large degree actually paying for it. So they know that's going to break up that agreement. Now, a second possible reason why this is happening is that it's precluded to an Israeli attack on Iran. Specifically, some say that Israel is trying to assassinate the top Hamas militants before hitting Iran, so that Iran's proxy Hamas can't retaliate. It's kind of like kicking out the legs on somebody's chair before you go in to attack them. It's not really a good comparison, but I think you get my drift on what it is I'm trying to say. They're trying to weaken part of the resistance that Iran can muster in case of an Israeli invasion, which also could be a valid point, which may be something they're also trying to do. Now, a third possible theory is that Israel's trying to drag Iran into a war, given that the Israeli treatment of Palestinians is a sensitive issue in Iran, but it's a key source of hostility towards the current Israeli administration and the Arab world, because, well, they're kind of mad that their Muslim brothers and sisters and their children are being pounded by Israel. So they know it's going to whip up a lot of angry sentiment and possibly drag Iran into a war with Israel, then justifying Israel nuking and, well, committing essentially a nuclear genocide against Iran and having the U.S. come in and back it up, if not the U.S. outright participating in such an action. This just shows outright Israel is the enemy. Israel is not just the enemy to Arabs in the Middle East. Israel is the enemy to everyone who wants peace, regardless of how somebody views that peace. Israel is a threat to the world. And the main reason why it's a threat to the world is because of its U.S. backing. Our enemies in the Middle East are not the poor peasant farmer in any Arab country that's trying to survive. It's not just any Arab citizen who owns a copy of the Quran and prays every day. These people are not my enemy. These people are not your enemy. The state of Israel is our enemy. We should not be supporting them. We should not be sending them aid. We should not be coming to their assistance, and our media should not be glorifying them or trying to portray them as victims. This is wrong. And what makes me even madder is the fact that despite all the statements from both Russia and China, who say that they don't agree with this and they back up self-determination in various Arab countries in the Middle East and around the world, they're not stepping in and doing anything. I mean, I believe them when they say they believe these countries have the right to self-determination, but they're not stepping in to help. I'm not saying that they should jump in militarily and start attacking Israel. I'm saying at least send some war materials or fly some aid into Palestine. I mean, come on, guys. If you're part of the anti-imperialist bloc, you should be helping out. I know it's a messy situation, but people are getting killed. Children are getting killed as a result of Israeli actions. And all of this is because the country that is most open to U.S. business interests, the financial elite, the industrial elite, is Israel. This is being done purely for the profit motive of the ruling elite in the United States, and obviously for the monetary gain of the ruling elite in Israel. This war needs to end. The West needs to stop supporting Israel. Viva Palestine.